Awesome. Thanks, Elise. And thanks to all our speakers for being here. Pretty excited about this event. So just real quick background from kind of why I'm talking to you right now. Panos Bakos and I recently started an advocacy committee within IBPSA USA with the goal of having more organized representation of energy modeling practitioners. And our primary, like our group's primary energy modeling focus is in support of, design decisions, high performance designs. We have workflow and software tools that work well for us seeking, pursuing design focus. And our goal is to have energy code compliance, the standards, the software, everything fit a little better within that process. Than it does currently. So our committee members have been having lots of great discussions and coming up with ideas on how to streamline code compliance. But it keeps coming up with obstacles of how to effectively influence these changes. And so, conversations, one thing led to another. CalBEM already exists. It's great representation and has some great stakeholders. And working group one has a focus on streamlining. So it made sense for that working group to kind of help fill this knowledge void. So here we are today. So thankful that those conversations helped to make this event happen. And yeah, very grateful again to our speakers volunteering their time today. Especially grateful to the Energy Commission for being so supportive of this event and purpose, and our kind of hypothetical conversations and discussions about how to make changes. So yeah, thanks. I guess that's it for my quick background here.
Awesome. Well, without any further ado, let's get into it. First, we'll be hearing from RJ Wichert from CEC, and then we'll move on to hearing about the case process from Heidi Werner and the CEC Title 24 adoption process from Rahul. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to RJ.
Cool. Thanks, Elise. Let's see. There we go. All right. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Today I'll be giving an overview of the energy code and the CBEC update process through an adoption cycle and the methods to provide productive feedback throughout this process. There we go. All right, so before we dive into the Energy Code process, I wanted to give a brief overview of the Energy Commission and how the Energy Code was established. The history of the CEC dates back to the passage of the Warren-Alquist Act in 1974, which created the Commission, carving out our unique authority to set building and appliance efficiency standards among many other directives. Two California Assemblymen, Charles Warren and Al Alquist, co-authored what is known today as the Warren-Alquist Act. This act authorized the Energy Commission to develop the Energy Code on a triennial basis and local jurisdictions to enforce the Energy Code through the building permit process. The Energy Code is developed to reduce the wasteful, uneconomic, inefficient, or unnecessary consumption of energy. This act was signed into law in 1974 by Governor Ronald Reagan. The California Energy Commission was launched by Governor Jerry Brown in 1975 with the appointment of the first 5 commissioners, and the commission immediately set out to meet the extensive mandates of the Warren-Alquist Act, including the adoption of the first buildings of energy efficiency standards in 1978. All right, so let's dive into the Energy Code. As mentioned earlier, the Energy Code is updated every 3 years, and as part of this process, the CEC is responsible for several things. Some of these are the code itself, Title 24, Part 6, CalGreen Voluntary Energy Measures, Title 24, Part 11, publicly available energy compliance software, CBEC-COM and RES, and outreach and education on the code. As directed by the Warren-Alquist Act, all Energy Code measures must be feasible, enforceable, cost-effective, and non-proprietary. All right, so let's dive into a little bit more. So legislation drives the goals of the Energy Code, and ultimately the measures selected for an update. Some of the current policy goals are to increase building energy efficiency cost-effectively, contribute to the state's greenhouse gas emission goals, enable pathways for all electric buildings, reduce residential building impacts on the electricity grid, promote demand flexibility and self-utilization of PV generation, and provide tools for local government reach codes. So to meet those policy, that legislation and those policy goals, the CEC has several objectives and activities. To list a few, the CEC works to ensure that the Energy Code responds to the current goals and policy drivers, seeks broad and in-depth stakeholder engagement for both code change proposals and public comments on proposed code updates. To facilitate public feedback, we conduct workshops and open dockets to record comments, and we respond to comments throughout the process, both formally during rulemaking and informally during pre-rulemaking phases. We also manage the CBEC software development and coordinate support for the case teams. After adoption, we update CBEC with the new standards, and add new features to the software in response to industry feedback. And lastly, but maybe the most important, is to provide outreach and education on the code and CBEC software. All right, so given that overview and those objectives, let's take a look at where we're at for 22. So we are right before the 15 language comments are due. They're due on the 28th. So if you have comments, please get them in soon. After that, we're going to be seeking adoption of the 22 standards at the August 11th business meeting. And if adopted, we'll then move into the post-adoption phase and begin working on the software, compliance manuals, and electronic documents. There's some more dates on there too. Let's see, let's move into the phases. So I broke down a code cycle adoption into a few phases so we can look at the milestones for each phase and show what types of material can be influenced during which periods to get productive feedback. If we get feedback at a phase after we already adopted something, we can't really use it effectively. So hopefully this thing would help. So let's look at the different phases. So the first one I'm calling the scoping phase. So during that phase, we establish the weather file updates, the metric updates, TDV for the software. The BSO would do stakeholder outreach, but the biggest part of this phase is the utility-sponsored stakeholder meetings and the outreach that goes along with that. And then further during this phase, we would identify measures and approve them to kind of move them forward to the next phases. So then we enter the pre-rulemaking. And so the other thing, actually, before we move on, you can notice the dates. Like this is a couple of years ago that we started the rulemaking or the process for updating 22. So, you know, it's a really long process, and so we're actually going to be starting for the next code cycle here pretty soon. So getting feedback early on is something that that we really want to stress. So yeah, so in the pre-rulemaking, we select measures that would then go into 45-day language. We present those at pre-rulemaking public workshops, the CEC does. And then we go through several feedback cycles with industry and the public and the case team to get those ready to be put into the code. And then we jump down to the rulemaking where we actually have the 45-day language set and we present it at lead commissioner hearings. And based off of those hearings, the feedback we get there, we then move to create 15-day language and post that. We don't do workshops for the 15-day language, but we do have a docket system throughout this whole process. So we would get comments during the hearings and then also on the dockets too. And then after adoption, we go into the post-adoption, and that's when we dig into the CBEC software, the manuals, the compliance documents, the education material, and then start to look at third-party software review and approvals. And then finally, the implementation, that would involve the ongoing CBEC maintenance and improvement, adding new features for things we couldn't get into the earlier versions, and a more third-party software maintenance and approval. All right, so now we'll go through some of the participation opportunities for each code cycle. So in the scoping, the biggest opportunity is the utility-sponsored stakeholder workshops, which I think you're going to hear more about later. And then also you can engage with the building standards staff directly in this kind of phase on measures or ideas for energy code updates. And then the pre-rulemaking, the CEC sponsored stakeholder workshops, the making comments at the workshops, and then also on the dockets for those is the big the means to give us your feedback. And then moving to the rulemaking, we have the lead commissioner hearings on the 45-day language, the comments at those hearings, multiple hearings, and also on the dockets, and then on just the docket for the 15-day language, like I mentioned earlier. And then post-adoption, we will have software implementation workshops, and we'll have alpha, beta, and research versions of software that we look for feedback on the dockets, and then also directly to the software staff. All right, so let's dig into the software update process. Let's see. Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, the when we get feedback is really important. So a lot of times when we dive into the software update, go into those workshops, we get questions about TDV and weather and how things measure up, how a device measures up, with those in consideration. And they were already decided before the rulemaking started in that scoping phase. So we can't do anything about that. And so with 19, we get a lot of questions about TDV and how it affects certain buildings, and it was already decided a long time ago. And so getting that feedback at the appropriate time is really, really important. So what we're planning to have, for each cycle, we have post-adoption workshops for the software changes, and in those we go over how we're going to implement the new code into the software and any new features that we're going to be added, like new things we can model. And we also go over, here's some examples, so things that aren't really directly written in the standards, but we have to put them in the software. So how EDR is implemented, how PV and demand response trade-offs are implemented in the software, like what you can trade away to different parts of the EDR, those kind of things that aren't in the standards, we would explain and give our proposals during those workshops and get feedback. And then also we would talk about new features in the software, like modeling central heat pump water heaters. And the different modes of participation are at the workshops, on the dockets, emailing the CBEC support emails. I give links to those later on. And then through the industry groups that we're a part of, like CalBEM. All right, so let's, given that overview, let's look at our current plan for 22 software. So we're planning several releases leading up to the final public actual compliance version, the 1.0 down at the bottom. So in December, we're planning to release an Alpha 1, and that's the initial release. There may not be everything in there, but we want to have as much of the baselines and new features in there as we can, but it may not be complete. And the Alpha 2 would be in February. These are all just our aims right now. The only one that's really set in stone is that last one, the 1.0 June. And so, yeah, for the Alpha 2, after we post the Alpha 2, we're then going to have public workshops to present those changes, like I was saying earlier, get feedback, and we'll open a docket to record all that feedback and keep track of it. Following that Alpha 2 workshop, we would then release a beta that reacts to that feedback we got, maybe has some more of the baselines incorporated, maybe has more new features that we couldn't get into the previous versions. And then following that beta and reacting to, and through this whole process, we have a docket and we'll be notifying the public when these things post so we can get that feedback. And in reaction to that beta feedback and adding more and more updates and getting all the baselines in, then we have a release candidate, and that comes out about a month or so before the business meeting. And that version is what we would then present to the commission for approval. And that RC gets turned into a 1.0 once it's approved. Yeah, let's see. Okay. And then let's see, lastly, some of the resources. So in order for you to stay up to date on all these processes, it's imperative to be signed up for that building standards list server. That's where we notify people, the public, of docketed material, notifications of workshops, new software releases, approved third-party software, business meeting notices, pretty much anything that's important that we do will be notified to the public on that list server. So you need to be signed up for that. For the current code cycle, the 22 Building Energy Efficiency Standards homepage, that's got links to those dockets so you can make comments. It has schedules, presentations, backup material, everything that's important for the code cycle is can be found from that page. And more important maybe after adoption in the implementation phase is the Blueprint newsletter. And that's a quarterly e-newsletter that gives project examples, code updates, FAQ clarifications, announcements. That's also a really good resource if you're not using it already. And then, yeah, to interact directly with the CBEC support staff and the CBEC, like the development staff, the CBEC Com and CBEC Res support emails are the best way to reach us. And then we don't have a 22 approved software webpage yet, but we will really soon as we start releasing those alphas and betas. But right now, I just linked the 2019 webpage. And then, yeah, user groups, CalBEM, KBEC, IBPSA USA. We have representatives in all those to hear public feedback through those pathways as well. And that's what I have. Yeah.
All right. Are you seeing
Looking
my
good.
screen? Okay. Let me see if I can just make it into. Let's just hide this. Okay. So thanks, Elise, for organizing and for everyone for being here. Just giving you a little forewarning that I am here with my sick daughter and alone in the house. So if you hear some coughing or noise, I apologize, and we'll try to get through this. So I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Statewide Utility Codes and Standards team. And the utilities that are involved in the statewide team are listed at the bottom: PG&E, SoCal Edison, SDG&E, LADWP, and SMUD. And the statewide utility codes and standards team actively supports the Energy Commission in developing proposed changes to Part 6. And the goal is to achieve cost-effective energy, water, and greenhouse gas savings that are feasible, cost-effective, enforceable, and non-proprietary. The Energy Commission is the state agency that has the authority to adopt changes to Part 6, and they, as RJ mentioned, they really run the public process and establish the foundation upon which we participate. So the statewide utility team is a stakeholder that participates in the Energy Commission's public process. There are other stakeholders that have participated. For many years, the statewide utility team was the only kind of member of the public that submitted code change proposals for the Energy Commission's consideration. That has changed in the last couple of code cycles, with the California Energy Alliance submitting proposals both last cycle and this cycle, and a few other participants becoming more active. So the statewide team's role is we suggest changes for the Energy Commission to include in each code cycle. We develop code change proposals, and then we participate in the Energy Commission's public process, and we support the Energy Commission in preparing for the effective date, including changes to the software. So in terms of measure identification, the utility team collects our own ideas on what we might want to bring to the Energy Commission for consideration. And we do get input from the public in that process. So there's a site on our website, title24stakeholders.com, where anyone can provide an idea. And many of those ideas are changes to the software that are not associated with a change to the standards. Okay. Okay. Try that. Sorry. Okay. And then in the end, the Energy Commission ultimately decides the scope of the code change. So the recommendations that the utility team provides really are recommendations. But we are working with the Energy Commission to decide which code change proposals the statewide team will pursue. And then we develop code change proposals. So the Energy Commission provides guidance to anyone from the public who wants to recommend a code change. And we follow that guidance that gives the Energy Commission the information that they need to move forward with a code change. The code change proposals or case reports include all of the information that's in the bullets here. The ones that are highlighted are ones that are related to the software. So we use the software to develop the energy savings estimates. We also recommend changes to the compliance software in Appendix D to the case reports. And then we also work with the Energy Commission to create markups for the ACM reference manuals. And then again, everything that we do with input from stakeholders. So the whole point of our stakeholder engagement is to make sure that stakeholders are engaged and informed and prepared for the code changes. We really want to encourage a constructive dialogue so that we're identifying and addressing issues. Okay, come sit with me. I'm presenting to some people, but you can talk to them too, okay? You can look at the thing. Okay. No? Okay. Sorry, everyone. Okay. And then a summary of our stakeholder engagement. We've had 23 public stakeholder meetings, formal surveys. We have a listserv with about 2,000 individuals, and we have hundreds of small group meetings or meetings with individuals. And then we also put all of our proposals out to public review, and that includes the recommended changes to the software that are included in Appendix D. So after we submit proposals, we participate in the Energy Commission's public process. So we're participating in the pre-rulemaking workshops that they host, the rulemaking workshops. We're reviewing comments that are submitted to the docket. We submit comments on our own. And we maintain a pretty regular communication with the Energy Commission to help refine proposals leading up to adoption. Sometimes that means that we're providing additional data. We might update our analyses that we submitted in our proposals to either evaluate the impact of a proposed change or to update the impacts analyses so that we have a more accurate accounting of what's going to change. So this is just to show you that we start out with a lot of potential code changes and we end up with a lot fewer. So I think we had about 200 or 300 proposed ideas and we ended up with about 70.
Heidi, can I stop you? Your
Sure.
presentation's not advancing. We're still seeing the first slide.
Oh, really? Okay.
The way it's shared is everyone has their own controls in the bottom left. Heidi's currently on slide 9. There's little arrows left and right.
Okay, do you want, let me see if I can reshare.
Or maybe just let us know what slide number you're on when you increment.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Let me just see if I can share my screen instead.
I fall down.
I know you fell down.
It's feeding.
Stop presenting.
It's feeding, Mama. It's feeding.
Okay, let me see. Let me see.
It's feeding.
I'm going to share my whole screen, see if that helps.
My bun came out.
Okay.
My bun came out.
Is that any better? Can you see? Oh, wait, come here. Let me give you a kiss.
Yep, that works.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Okay. So, and then the last thing that we do is we help the Energy Commission prepare for adoption. So that's updating compliance manuals. It's helping with the ACM reference manuals. It's participating in the public process for both of those documents. And then it's helping updates to the compliance software. So I just want to move on just to make some specific comments about changes to the software. So this is a little bit of a process flow of at least my vision of how this all works. So the first step is selecting enhancements, and we collect ideas through the ideas intake that I mentioned before. We also know that CalBEM Working Group 3 is developing an approach that we can engage this CalBEM community to identify code change proposals and prioritize them. And then ultimately, again, it's the Energy Commission that makes the decisions on which software enhancements move forward. And once the Energy Commission makes the decision that something should move forward, there's a bit of a decision point, and we ask, does this enhancement need to be connected with a change to the language? So either to the standards or the joint appendices. And if the answer is yes, then the next steps of the enhancement most likely will happen in conjunction with a code change cycle. So either the 2022 or 2025 code cycle where there's changes to the standards or joint appendices. And if the answer is no, and that enhancement doesn't have to go along with language changes, then the change can happen out of sync with the code cycle. And then the next step, once we've decided, or the Energy Commission has decided that a software enhancement can move forward, is really preparing for implementation. So that's collecting data to inform the revision, and that can happen. I mean, we can get data from the Energy Commission, the utilities, or members of the public. And then what we do is we help develop a software specification document. The utilities have done this in the past, but others could potentially do it. And this software specification is actually the same that's included in Appendix D to our case reports for the 2022 code cycle. And then the last step is really implementation, and the implementation is really in the Energy Commission's court. So they make the changes to the software. And then the changes go out for, here, let me open that for you. I'm so sorry, you guys. And then the software is released, and it's the software is updated about twice a year. So, okay, I'm almost done here, Gemma. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that the utility team, hey, can you hold on 1 second? The utility team does have Energy Code ACE, and it has local energy codes, and those are both services that support code development. So I'm going to pause myself. I'm so sorry, and I hand it back to Rahul to keep going, and I'll be available for questions in a minute.
Admirably done.
All good, Heidi. All right. So yeah, you guys just heard from RJ and Heidi about how the CEC process works. Oh, let me just turn on my video real quick here. What is that? Okay. Yeah, you guys heard from RJ about how the CEC process works, and then from Heidi about how the case process works. So the objective of my couple of slides is really to talk about a couple of scenarios and how they might, or changes that Greg and the other modelers might want to see, and how they might work through the process. Really, I borrowed most of this information from Greg's email, so I hope that Greg can chime in and we can have a discussion about these items. All right. Okay, so the first scenario here is an alternate compliance pathway. What we're talking about here is the way the current software works is that all projects must use the compliance software towards compliance. And what Greg and others are suggesting here is to allow the design team to develop their own proposed and baseline models outside of the software, and then have that verified independently by a third-party organization. I think this is how LEED works. Some jurisdictions do it this way. Other jurisdictions really have a close control on, like I'm thinking of Seattle, they really look at every single model. We don't have to do that here because we have the compliance software that does that. But at the same time, that restricts, the state-of-the-art buildings and design teams from modeling really new technologies and state-of-the-art stuff. So how do we sort of achieve that happy balance? And what other mechanisms might exist to make that happen? So this is really a discussion around that. And if we wanted to make such a change to the current process, how would that work through through the system. So I'm just going to pause here, and I don't know if RJ and the CEC folks want to say anything, and what if Greg wants to add anything to that. So, yep.
I don't have much to add, but you definitely started with the hardest one.
Yeah, Rahul, can you keep that up on the screen? I lost your the slide.
Okay. I feel like I'm not even in the meeting anymore. I don't see the Teams thing. Okay, I'll bring that back up. I'm just going to join again.
I can elaborate a little bit. Some of the discussions around on our committee have just been like, we've been trying to brainstorm what the ideal compliance pathway is, performance-based, like modeling compliance pathway, I guess, using what our committee members are working on in maybe California, some jurisdictions who are a little more flexible in what they accept, software wise and whatnot, because they have goals and goals that are pushing for like decarbonization and electrification, and are using heat recovery chillers and things that aren't or haven't been until very, very recently in the software that has been the only option, or like savings by design. Former savings by design has been a little more flexible, and they want to incentivize actual designs and actual energy efficiency measures, where again, if a technology is being used, or equipment, or a strategy is being used that isn't accommodated in the ACM and the software, right? It's like, okay, well, the design team and the energy modelers are able to develop the baseline following the ACM rules, and then with minor tweaks along the way, in order to model the actual design. So yeah, this is happening here and there in California. I know it's not like a kind of stamped and approved process, but yeah, as Rahul mentioned, it's also happening in other parts of the country, other jurisdictions, other parts of North America. Really, Canada's doing a lot of different things. So I don't know. Hopefully that context is helpful.
All right. Should I queue up the next one? All right. So this was also on Greg's list about the 90.1 Appendix D approach, and probably this is probably going to be in the next call as well. But yeah, so 90.1 Appendix D has the approach with a stable and independent baseline, whereas the current ECM approach has the baseline that changes every cycle. And so the comment from again, Greg, feel free to chime in, was to have the Appendix D approach within Heidi 24. And my contribution to this is I would say that we've already worked on this. We have the BPFs and some of the parts figured out, and then there are some next steps that are needed. But this is on the Energy Commission's radar and currently under review and evaluation.